Welcome to the LS Community Church podcast. We're a church located in Lee's Summit, Missouri, that is dedicated to making disciple makers who saturate our city and the world with the gospel. For more information, check out our website at lscckc.org. Thanks for listening.
Good morning. It's good to be down south. I hail from just north of you in what used to be the small town of Liberty, Missouri, which is no longer a small town. It's become like Lee's Summit, so big place. We've got everything. We used to come to Lee's Summit for stuff. Now we don't come there anymore. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm thankful, Stan, for the opportunity to be a part of this series this morning. A couple of friends of mine have been with you the last few weeks, and I'd like to tell a few stories about them, but we don't have a lot of time for that. But words do matter. If I told you that my grandmother likes climbing vines, I can tell some of you have had 2 cups of coffee already. My grandmother likes climbing vines. You're beginning to wonder. If his grandmother's still alive, she's either enormously athletic or she's a gardener. Which is it? Yeah, words matter, don't they? Words create worlds. The words we use create worlds. And I would suggest, and we don't have time to explore this morning, but I would suggest that the words you use are words that are shaped by the metaphors or the filters that have been built into your life. I want to spend a lot of time here, but just to stop for a moment and talk about, let's use the word conflict. All right? Conflict. I could probably take a survey here this morning, and I know how it's going to come out. There are about maybe 80 to 90% of you that when I say the word conflict, you have a very negative image of conflict. But I do know that there are a few weird people in the room. There are 10 to 20% of you that have a positive idea of conflict. And you think conflict can lead to something positive. And in fact, there are some of you sitting next to people you call your spouses this morning that you wish you could have some conflict to lead to something positive, right? You want to raise your hands? You could just use an elbow there. You see, the word conflict, if you think about all the ways we talk about it, stand your ground, state your case, all of the words we use around conflict all come from kind of a military warring type thing. And so it impacts, there's an image behind the word itself that impacts the emotion that we feel for the words. And so when we think about this idea of words create worlds or words matter, we realize that James is dealing in this book with some really important things. I would say maybe even some fundamental things, some things that sit at the base of even the song, one of the songs, I will build my life on your foundation. I'm not sure the exact words, but that idea of the foundation. John, disciple of Jesus, called Jesus the Word of God. He was literally something we read. We see this word. And so James's brother is helping us come to understand what it means to live this out. And we're in chapter 3 of the book of James today. And I hope to leave you today disturbed. Now, I apologize, and you can, please don't blame Stan or any of the leaders around here or anything for anything I say, because I'm going to take it back to Liberty, take my heresy with me, and it'll be okay. But I do know that if you're attempting to help adults transform, that you cannot just comfort them with words. You have to afflict them with words. Because when you get discomforted, you and I are addicted to comfort. We will find the comfort. And so a good educator, a good teacher, a good communicator will realize that if I leave people with more questions than answers, they will find the answers for themselves. And so today I hope to leave you with a few questions. And the first one I'd like to start with in James chapter 3 is what problem is James attempting to solve? What problem is James attempting to solve here? He starts out in verse 1, not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers and sisters, because you know those who teach will be judged more strictly. So let me ask again, what problem is he attempting to solve? I think when Jay Cole was here, he did a good job of helping you understand the context of the book. This book is written to who? This is not a rhetorical question. You can actually talk in church and not be a Pentecostal, all right? Or a church meeting or church gathering. So who's this book written to? Come on. Jews, all right? So they're scattered all over the place now. It's written to these children of Abraham who are scattered all over the place. And he's saying, let not many of you become teachers. If I could for a moment, I rarely get to do this, but I would like to pull out something from my past. When you're looking at that passage in English, you may not really kind of get the whole import of it, because I would like to suggest that sometimes our translators of the scriptures were impacted by culture, Western culture, and so they have a hard time putting it in the kind of words that really are there in the scriptures. So there's a translation that I can find in some of the digital versions called Young's Literal Translation. And anybody use that, Young's Literal Translation? I mean, it's really hard to read because it truly is a literal translation. And to call it a literal translation is even difficult. But in Young's words, he gives us the real understanding of this. Now, this has a real personal feel to me because my college degree, I went to that powerhouse in the Big 12, that place that's often called Harvard on the Brazos, Baylor University. Wow. Not even one sick'em bear here? I mean, come on. And when I went to Baylor, my father grew up in the military. I grew up in the military. My father was in the military, so I was coming from Hawaii. And so I go back home at Christmas, and my dad says, what are you going to major in, son? And I had taken all this time to build this opportunity to tell my dad. My dad never went to college. He never even graduated from high school. He got his GED, went into the military. He was really self-made, and his whole hope was his two sons would go on to college and get an education and fulfill the American dream. I come home at Christmas. He's asking me, what are you going to major in? I'm sure my dad has ideas of what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I tell him, Dad, I'm going to major in Greek. And my father's wondering, what do you do with a Greek major? You know, who knows what you do with that? Well, I'm going to use it today, if you don't mind. If you don't mind, I'm going to use it because when you read this passage, there's an interesting construction in here, and it happens in another famous passage in Philippians too. It's this idea that this verb here, don't be teachers. This idea is really in a a tense and a mood and a voice. Any English majors in here? You love that. I mean, we just don't do that anymore, do we? Tense, mood, voice, all that kind of stuff. So it's in a tense and a mood and a voice that really does mean don't start or stop. So let's reread the passage. If you have a Bible with you today, or you're looking on your phone and not looking at Facebook or any other feed, not many of you should presume. Okay, what he's really saying is that don't be teachers or stop being teachers. Now that doesn't fit in the Western church tradition, does it? Because the way this is organized is the way we're experiencing it right now. There's one supposedly really smart person in the room. And where are they? Supposed to be me, right? And there are other people that are not so smart. And where are they? They're looking at each other's, back of each other's heads, right? And so there's one person in this room that's very active. And there are a lot of people in this room that are very passive. And so James is speaking to something in his culture that was very similar to this. These are Jews. They're used to going to synagogue. They've grown up in certain ways. And James is attempting to identify with his brother. Remember his brother? Jesus, come on. It's the answer to every question in church, right? Just answer Jesus, you'll be right 80% of the time. In Matthew 23, Jesus, the brother of James, gives us a really interesting thought. Now, Jesus came onto the scene, and his biggest enemies were the religious leaders of the day. The Sadducees and the Pharisees, you remember those names, those words, you know, and so I want to read the first few verses of chapter 23 in Matthew. It says, then Jesus said to the crowds and his disciples, all right, so there's two types of people here. There are people who are sort of interested in Jesus, and then there are disciples, people who are learning obedience to everything that Jesus has commanded. And he says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All right, so they sit where Moses sat, and he says, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you. Now you've got to learn to read the scriptures in terms of seeing the literary nature of this, because there's some irony here. Jesus says you've got to be careful to do everything they tell you to do, but don't do what they do. Don't do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move. So Jesus paints a picture here of people who are hypocrites, right? They say one thing and they do another. He says everything they do is done for people to see. So they're not only hypocrites, but they're image managers. They're doing it to be thought of in a way that they aren't truly that way. Everything they do for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and their tassels of their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have people call them rabbi. And then Jesus goes on to issue what I think ought to be a more observed command for those of us who exist post-cross and call ourselves followers of Jesus. He says, but do not be called rabbi, for you have only one master. You are all brothers. So Jesus is giving us this idea that he's come to democratize heaven. He's come to make the access to heaven flat. He's come to take away intermediate and make it mediate. He's come to give access on a personal level, not through someone. And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called teacher, for you have one teacher, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be the servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Exalted. Those who exalt themselves will be exhausted. That's yeah. So Jesus is giving us a sort of a understanding of this T-shirt that I saw this morning when I came in. Guy walked up to me with a microphone and a case, and he has this T-shirt with this word written across it. And I'm looking at it going, I think that's kingdom written upside down, right? Popular T-shirt around here. That's what Jesus is helping us understand, is that he came to bring an upside down kingdom. This idea that the ground at the foot of the cross is level. The ground at the foot of the cross is level. That means you and I have immediate access. We don't have to go through anyone but Jesus to get to Jesus. Jesus is our connection to the Father in heaven. It's immediate. The ground at the foot of the cross is level. So do I need a teacher? I don't. Do I need a rabbi? I don't. Do I need a father? I don't. James is simply reiterating what his brother was teaching us. He's helping us understand that the ground at the foot of the cross is level. So practically, what does that mean? What does that mean? It means that you and I ought to eradicate dependency, human dependency, in every area of our spiritual journey. That doesn't mean we ought not to be interdependent, but when my primary source is a space like this on a Sunday morning, when I come here to charge my batteries and go back out and the batteries drain, something's wrong with that kind of metaphor image. When I love my group so much that I can't live without them, there's something wrong with that very thing. Because both Jesus and James are helping us understand that until we get our fingerprints on the Bible itself, we never find the true sense of what it means to be a son or a daughter of the King. You have a Father in heaven. You have a Father in heaven who likes you. He doesn't just love you, he likes you. He wants to spend time with you. He wants you to have your fingerprints on his word. He wants to speak into your world. You know, when God decided to solve our problems of human flourishing by sending Jesus into this world, he sent him into this world, and Jesus collected a group of men to himself, and those men and their families gathered around Jesus. What's the first thing they wanted to know from Jesus? Think about it for a moment. Those of you who are familiar with the Bible, some of you aren't, that's okay. But for those of us who are familiar with the Bible, the first thing they wanted to know from Jesus was what? Teach us to pray. Jesus goes off and he spends time with his Father. And he says things to them like, I only do what my Father tells me. And so they say, teach us that. Help us understand that. What's that like to have that kind of relationship with the creator God of the universe? That's what they wanted to know. And that's the secret sauce to the spiritual journey. That's why James tells us, let not many of you become teachers. Stop trying to be teachers. Stop, don't. You need to focus on yourself, not other people. You need to do what James is talking about in the beginning of this passage. Who comes to a mirror and looks in the mirror and their hair's messed up and they go away and they don't do anything about it. Or they've got stuff on their clothes or they got things in their teeth. Yeah, that's just not something that happens with a human. What do? We fix it, right? And James has said earlier in this passage, the scriptures is a mirror. And so instead of focusing on communicating the truth to other people, James is reiterating the fact that you and I ought to be focused on communicating the truth to ourselves. Because fundamentally, Jesus said, if you love me, know what I say. Right? No, he said, if you love me, do what I say. Do what I say. You caught it, didn't you? Yeah, you knew that was a trick. If you love me, do what I say. See, there's two words in the Greek for knowledge. One is oida, which is to know something, and the other is gnosko, to experience something. And so this idea of knowing something is sometimes we get caught up on. We think that knowing something will lead to doing something. I don't think that's true, because most of us violate that on a regular basis. Let's talk about the healthy food groups you should be eating. There are only a few of us in this room that haven't eaten sugar, that don't eat chocolate, that don't drink too much caffeine or fat or all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, I know you'll come up to me and tell me that afterwards. You're that one. That's good. Good for you. But the rest of us, we're really sloppy. We know what we shouldn't eat. You know when you go into even that cafe downstairs, there are some things you shouldn't eat, but man alive, those muffins, they're hot, and by golly, I'm going to put some butter on it, make it even better. Who cares about my cholesterol, right? There's lots of things we know, but we don't do. So knowing does not lead to doing. And so Jesus comes along and says, look, I just need you to focus on yourselves. Imagine what it would be like if you and I lived in a world where on a regular basis we were identifying parts of the scriptures that we could do something about. So in the last few minutes I have left, I want to teach you a little way of handling the scriptures. Like I have a degree in Greek, so I don't know if that's impressive to you or not, but if it's not, that's okay. But this is the way, after learning all that Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic and all that kind of stuff, this is the way that I was taught long after that to handle the scriptures. And it's the most effective way that I've seen to put this passage into practice. So I take a notebook and I divide it into 3 columns. Now, personally, I am not bound by lines in a notebook. Some of you are, I get that, okay? So you can do it this way and draw your lines horizontally. I turn my notebook this way and I draw them horizontally. In my first column, I would take the first 6 verses of this passage. So this is your homework for this week. All right? This is your homework. Get a notebook, and in one column, copy James 3, 1 through 6. You heard me right. I didn't say cut and paste. I said with the original word processor, you know, one of, I think I've got one on here, one of these things, I literally copy the passage exactly word for word from my Bible into my notebook. Why do I do that? I do that because I never read it as clearly and as slowly and as fundamentally as when I have to copy it. It causes me to slowly move through what James is saying. So I copy it there. And then in my second column, I come back and I actually put it in my words. Some of you know who Eugene Peterson is. He helped us get the Bible in a book called The Message, a paraphrase of the Bible. And so I want you to become Eugene Peterson in that moment. In that middle column, I want you to put this passage in your own words. I want you to make some decisions about what James is saying. When Paul says, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, this is what he's talking about. You see, salvation is free, it's a gift. But spiritual maturity takes effort. It takes energy from you to draw near to God. And what does he do? He draws near to you. And so in that center column, I'm putting this in my own words. I'm rereading what I've copied over there. And I'm saying, what does he mean here? And I'm putting it in my own words. But that's not enough. There are two more vital things that have to happen before this passage is going to have my fingerprints all over it. The third column is a column where I look at what I've written down and I say, if this is God speaking, if this is God speaking to me, what does he want me to do about it? Because Jesus said, not know what if you love me, not know what I say, but do what I say. So what is God encouraging me to do? And so I come up with an action, a behavior. I remember the first time I did this in a group, and I had this 70-year-old guy in the group who was kind of crusty. He was a construction guy, owned his own construction firm, and he really wasn't a follower of Jesus yet, wasn't even familiar with the Bible. We were in Genesis, and as we read through Genesis 1, he got to this point of, I will, Mike, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this creation story that you've heard? And Mike looked at me and he said, I've made fun of tree huggers all my life. I think these ecology people are crazy. But if I understand what this is saying here, that God created the world and wants me to take care of it. So I'm going down to City Hall tomorrow and get me a recycling bin. And I'm going to start recycling. That was his response to Genesis chapter 1. That was Mike's first step to knowing Jesus. And so in that third column, I'm asking for you, what is it you're going to do about it? In the next 24 to 48 hours, if I show back up in Lee Summit and I ask, okay, you read this, what are you doing about it? Imagine what it would be like if every family unit, if roommates, if every space that made up of Lee Summit Community Church every week was operating under this idea of, okay, God, you're asking me to do this, and we're holding each other accountable for it. Imagine what would happen. Third column, it's my I will statement. What are you going to do about it? The fourth column is vital as well. And at this point, this is where I ask the question of myself, okay, who can I share with what God is doing in my life this week? And I put a name down there. I actually trust God to give me a name of a person that I want to share with what he's up to in my life. Sometimes that's someone who's a fellow follower of Jesus, but many times it's not. Many times it's people I'm developing relationships with what I'm hoping to introduce them to my Father in heaven. And that becomes a name that week that I pray for and about regularly to enter into conversation with them about what God's doing in my life. You see, I think what James is trying to reiterate here when he says don't start or stop is the idea of you focusing outward with the truth rather than you first focusing inward with the truth. Because that was what his brother Jesus claimed the Pharisees were doing. They sat in Moses' seat and they were putting heavy burdens on the people, but they weren't doing it themselves. They weren't focused internally with the truth. And so Jesus tells that really funny story. Oftentimes we don't get first century humor, but he tells that really funny story about the coffee cup. I don't know if you've ever existed in an office where someone set a coffee cup aside and for a day or two or three or five, and then all of a sudden you come back and that coffee cup has mold in it. This is the vision that Jesus has when he tells that story. It's like you come back and how stupid would it be to take that to the sink and meticulously wash the outside of the cup and leave all that garbage inside. And then pour a nice, fresh, hot cup of coffee in there and drink it. Now, if we saw that's really funny physical humor, isn't it? I mean, Saturday Night Live could do it, as a prank in an office then we would laugh, but somehow we don't get Jesus' humor. It's humor, but it's also truth. We focus on the inside of the cup and we clean it first. And so James is syncing up with his brother here to make that happen. You see, that's what it looks like to get our fingerprints on the Bible. That's what it looks like to build a relationship with the Creator God of heaven who came to visit us. A father who's heartsick for his family to come together. And we're about to enter into a moment where the family comes around a table, and that table represents those of us who've come to follow Jesus. Those of us who've come to put the jersey on. I don't know about here, but I know during football season at Shoal Creek, sometimes on Sunday morning, people walk in and they're very irreligious. They walk in with like Packers jerseys and Vikings jerseys and, oh my God, even Raiders jerseys. I know. It's terrible. But then there are the faithful that walk in with it's Red Sunday, right? What we're about to enter into is a moment where those of us who've put on the Jesus jersey really celebrate. Some of us haven't yet. Some of us are on the way. Some of us are trying to figure it out. And that's okay. That's okay. You can just sit and enjoy this moment and think about what it would be like to connect to Jesus. Or maybe today is your day to say yes to Jesus. You're thinking, I really would like to say yes. I'd like to put on the Jesus jersey. And so this ceremony is for you because the cup represents Jesus' blood when he died in your place. And the bread represents his body that was broken for you, that demonstrates that the price, any price that you think you owe God for a relationship with him has been paid. Absolutely been paid. And the freedom for you to say yes to Jesus is there. That's all it takes. Would you close your eyes, bow your heads for a moment here as we get ready? Father, thank you. Thank you that you've given us the opportunity to be your children. We are grateful. We're grateful for those actions that you took 2,000 years ago. We're grateful that you continue to communicate to us your love. And we look forward to this time together around the cup and the bread. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks again for tuning in today to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, share, and watch for special episodes. For more information about LS Community Church, visit our website at lsccKC.org or follow us on social media.